All right, let's dig right into a huge paradox, something that seems completely impossible. How in the world do the tallest buildings on Earth stand firm on some of the weakest ground you can imagine?
I mean, it really does seem impossible, right? Just picture it. The Burj Khalifa. We're talking 500,000 tons of steel and concrete, and it's just sitting there on the loose, sandy soil of Dubai. Every part of your brain is screaming that it should just sink straight into the ground.
But it doesn't. And the reason is this amazing engineering secret, this skin secret that has way more to do with rubbing than it does with resting on solid ground. It's all about how you can turn what's basically mush into a fortress. So you gotta ask, how on earth does that work?
Okay, to really get this, we first have to completely bust a major myth that almost everyone believes about construction.
You know the thinking, if you're gonna build a skyscraper, you just have to dig down until you hit solid rock, right? Seems pretty simple. But what happens when you dig, and there's just no rock to be found? Well, that's the exact nightmare scenario for a ton of the world's most ambitious projects. In Dubai, for the Burj Khalifa, engineers went down 140 meters and found, well, nothing, just more sand and really weak, crumbly rock. Over in San Francisco, you've got 55 meters of stuff they literally call bay mud. And in Tokyo, the spot where the Skytree stands today, it used to be part of the bay. So the real question is, how do you build a Titan on what is, for all intents and purposes, a swamp? Okay, so with no solid ground anywhere in sight, engineers had to get creative. And they turned to this, just a brilliantly simple idea.
Let's try a little thought experiment. Imagine you push a single nail into a bucket of sand. It's super unstable, right? You can wiggle it all over the place, pull it right out. It's offering basically zero support.
But now, what happens if you take a whole bunch of nails, say 100 of them, and hammer them in all packed tightly together? Suddenly, everything changes. Those nails aren't just sitting there by themselves anymore. They start working together. See, each nail grips the sand around it, and that sand then locks in with the sand around all the other nails. And just like that whole cluster becomes one single solid block. It's now almost impossible to push down, and it fights back hard if you try to wiggle it from side to side. That collective grip is so much more powerful than just adding up the grip of each individual nail. So this whole nail in the sand effect, it actually has a scientific name. And believe me, it is the core concept holding up huge parts of our modern world. It's called skin friction. And honestly, the name kinda says it all. The stability, the strength, it's not coming from the tip of the pile hitting some hard floor deep underground. Nope, it all comes from the friction that's generated along the pile's entire surface. It's skin, as it rubs against the soil. It's that simple. More surface area means more grip. And this comparison here just shows it perfectly. You've got two main ways of doing this. End-bearing piles, think of those like stilts standing on a solid floor. But friction piles? They're totally different. They act more like a hand that's gripping the earth all around it. They don't need a floor to stand on because their strength comes from that tight surrounding grip. And get this is not some brand new high-tech idea. We're talking way back in 1898. Engineers drove over 5,000 wooden piles deep into San Francisco's bay mud to support the ferry building. And that building? It survived the massive 1906 earthquake and the big one in 1989, all because of the incredible collective grip of what was basically an underwater forest of wood.
So, okay, we've established this grip can stop a building from just sinking into the ground. But what might be its most critical job is something else entirely, especially in places where the ground itself decides to start moving.
Let's go back to the Burj Khalifa. It's resting on this forest of 192 reinforced concrete piles, each one 43 meters long. And again, they are not resting on anything solid. It's the immense skin friction between those piles and the surrounding sand and weak rock that holds all 500,000 tons up. So that takes care of the vertical stability, the sinking problem. But what do you do in a place where the biggest threat isn't sinking, it's shaking? I mean, just look at the numbers here. Dubai is pretty seismically calm. San Francisco gets hundreds of tremors a year. But Tokyo? We're talking a staggering 1,500 seismic events. For a skyscraper in a place like that, just staying upright during a major earthquake, that is the ultimate test.
And this is where skin friction becomes an absolute lifesaver. Because that same grip, it doesn't just work vertically, up and down, it also provides incredible side-to-side strength. Engineers call this horizontal rigidity. It basically locks the building's foundation into the earth around it. So when an earthquake hits, the building and the ground move together as one single unit. And that's what stops it from getting ripped apart. And that brings us to the final piece of this whole puzzle, how modern engineers are making this grip even stronger than ever, turning the absolute weakest soil into a totally unshakable anchor.
So take the Tokyo Skytree. It's sitting on some of the softest ground you can possibly imagine. Regular old friction piles just weren't going to cut it, so the engineers gave them a major upgrade. They designed these massive wall-like piles and then added these awesome little protrusions that they call knuckles.
And these knuckles are they're ingenious. First, they dramatically increase the pile's surface area. This creates a much stronger, way more aggressive grip on the soil. They dig in almost like spikes, giving it the maximum possible resistance against not just earthquakes, but typhoons too. They basically anchored the tower like the roots of a giant tree, sprawling out and holding on for dear life.
So when you boil it all down, the most crucial point is this. We kind of need to shift our whole understanding of what stability even means. You know, we're all taught to look for solid ground, for that hard, rocky bottom to stand on. But what modern engineering has proven is that that's just not the only way. You start to realize that stability isn't always about finding hard ground. It's about using the grip of the soil itself to turn what's basically liquid mud into a fortress. Instead of searching for a foundation, engineers have figured out how to create one, right there. They harness that simple, powerful force of friction, and they take the weakest sand, the softest mud, and lock it all together into one solid, immovable mass. They don't find a fortress, they build one, right where they need to stand.